Pedro from A&P-Reacts. I'm here today with Harald of Imminence to talk about Heaven in Hiding. Out, well, by the time you're hearing this conversation, the album is out already on the Rising Empire. You can enjoy this magnificent album that these guys put together. How's it going?
Thank you so much for the introduction. It's going really well, thank you. And thank you so much for the great review. I watched it, and I think it was quite spectacular. So I know you are like reviewing a lot of albums like all the time. So to hear you say these nice things about what we did here is definitely amazing. So thank you so much for that.
Yeah, I listen to a lot of music, and you guys found a way of absolutely shocking me, but in a positive way. Like the album, I was floored. This is one of those records that if there's a positive or a light at the end of the tunnel as far as 2021 is concerned, Heaven in Hiding is definitely a part of that light.
Wow, thank you so much. I must say that for us, it's exactly what it is as well. And also, I mean, talking about the entire pandemic and everything that happened over that time for us as a band and also for us personally, to finally put out this album that we've been working on during this entire time is definitely, yeah, it's definitely light at the end of the tunnel for us as well.
So let's talk about that, creating the record. How was the creative process behind this album, or maybe in general? How is the creative process behind the band? How do you guys tackle a record?
Well, it's me and Eddie who are writing the music, and generally, I just think that it starts off with us just having we've reached a point now where I think we are very, very comfortable with working with each other, and I think we have developed a sort of collaboration now where we can understand each other very well, and we know exactly the different trail of thoughts that we are processing, while being creative with each other. So this sort of not spoken communication between us now when we are writing. But I think for this writing, this album cycle, it started slightly before, by the end of, I would say, end of 2019. We have started with just some easy demoing here and there. So we were fortunate enough to go on our European tour in February 2020. And after that, the pandemic just hit super hard to Europe and to everywhere else. So what we did, what we could do was basically just to dive right into the songwriting, because all of the other touring plans, for example, and a lot of other things that we had scheduled got pushed or canceled. And, when you've been living this sort of lifestyle for a long time, it kind of challenges you in a lot of ways. So what we could find like comfort and some sense in was really the creative process. So to spend a lot of time together, and we wrote very like effortlessly I would say. We felt there was like no stress, and it was a very meaningful thing to devote your time to during the pandemic. So like any influence that we had or anything that we felt inspired of was something that we could work on, and there was nothing wrong or nothing right in terms of direction. It was just very natural. And I think it's pretty strange when you think about the album is, in a way, I think it's the most coherent one at the same time as a lot of the songs are very different from each other. So I think it's quite remarkable how we got to that point just through us being very open-minded and spontaneous with what we were writing.
It's funny that you say that, because I felt a little bit of the same. I felt like this record also feels like it has a lot of depth to it, but at the same time, it feels very organic and natural, and it feels easy to get into it, because it's not a record that you have to like peel the layers in order for you to really get to the essence of the album. This album immediately hits you the moment you press play.
Well, thank you. I think that's really nice to hear. I guess that what we want to achieve with our music is to have that instant connection with with the listener, where you just hit them right in the feelings, right in the heart. But and but also creating that bond to the listener, that you want to go back and that you want to find something more in the music or in the lyrics. And I think it can trace that back to what we're trying to achieve with, for example, our music videos, or like where we try to connect that with a lot of elements that can be found in the music, or even, in our merchandise items, that we try to create like a bigger context for the person who finds Imminence, that you can just dive into, and that you can find more than what just instantly hits you.
So when you guys start working on this record, did you guys have an idea that you wanted something that perhaps was slightly different from the previous albums, or like you said, was it 100% organic, and what came and what stayed?
Of course, it's a learning process to write a couple of albums. Like, you develop as a songwriter, and you develop as a band also. Like, you reach new places together. But the first thing that we do when we approach a new album cycle is to really just tear down everything that you came from. Like, you have to just destroy the last album, like boom, down to the ground. There's nothing left here. There's a clean slate for you to start over from. And that can be anything, really. That can be really anything that inspires you. But up until to this day, I feel like, even though we've explored and discovered different sort of approaches and sounds in our music, I believe there's always been something in common with all the releases we've done. There is a theme, that I think is shining through, even inconsiderate of which album we are talking about. And I feel like that's the most natural part of our sound, like of Imminence, that just will come whatever we are trying to do. And that feels like a pretty safe place. Like, we know sort of what we want to say with the music, but how it should sound is just a complete different thing. We have to discover that all over again when we do something new.
How much for your live sound do you try to bring in to the studio sound? Do you have an idea of how you guys perform live and what works live, and then try to incorporate perhaps as much as you can of that essence into the studio record?
Yeah, I mean, to bring your song to the live stage, I would say, is definitely, that's the ultimate goal somehow. Like, to perform it live in front of an audience and feel that power and energy of the song bouncing off a crowd, but when it comes to how we should make the song sound, I think to make it organic is very important for us. Of course, we spend a lot of time to get the right sort of takes, and that was a great thing to work with Henrik, now our producer, Henrik Udd, who lives outside. He has a studio outside of Gothenburg, because he really has that raw, very, very genuine approach in terms of production. Of course, we spend a lot of time on the tracking and whatever it can be, but it's more about finding the right feel, and the right take, where it's not always about making it 100% perfect. I mean, a lot of the times, he would say things like, the way you played there, like right there, that was you. Like, that was you coming through your guitar. Like, I could feel that, and I can hear it that in your take. And also the way where I tracked like guitar, it was, we didn't go digital here. Like, I tracked it with amps, like real amps, real tubes, which I haven't done for I don't know how long. And we wanted to have that sort of, the album reflecting us as how we sound as players also, or as Eddie's, especially with Eddie's vocals as well, like to really make it feel like, this is him singing it.
Perhaps the most important question that I have for you today, after listening to this album, is how do you guys create a record where every song is a 10, but then when you listen to the album is an 11? How do you do that? Because this album has singles across each and every single track. Each song is beautiful and magnificent, But then when you listen to the album as a whole from beginning to end, the album together as one, it's even more powerful than the strength of the individual songs. How do you do that?
Wow, that's very, very nice feedback of you. It sounds like Spinal Tap, turn it to 11.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Really.
You guys were at 10, but it's like the whole album, it can go all
Wow.
the way to 11.
Yeah, I think I think that it's more about when we wrote a couple of the songs, and when we actually got to write the track Heaven in Hiding, which is the title track, I felt like we found something. We found direction, a direction that was very. It felt like, okay, this is starting to shape up like a theme here, and we could see like there was this song was really a connecting puzzle piece with a lot of the other. I think we had at that time we had Temptation, and Heaven and Hiding was coming, and um I don't really remember, but we had a few of the songs in demo stage, and we when that was written, we felt like this was okay, this was connecting all the dots here, and that sort of set, also lyrically, we felt that it was sort of creating that context, and we felt that okay, this is sort of starting to tell a story here, and this is kind of opens up the way where like how we want to like where we want to take this album. And it doesn't mean that any of the songs have to sound or say exactly what the other ones are doing, but I felt like there was always that in the back of your head, like, okay, what is the concept, like what is the theme here. And when we wrote a song that felt like it matched this, we chose to put it on the album. So I think there's a sense of unity here that is giving really the full picture, which is really hard to do with just singles. And I'm really glad that we've gotten to that stage, because the music industry today is just very, very focused on single releases, and when it comes to rock and metal music, I think it's still very album oriented, because the fans are looking for this. They are looking for the bigger picture. They are looking for the whole concept, and this is exactly what we wanted to give, like a bigger picture.
I had a conversation with my son about this record and about this topic of singles and an album, because I heard a couple of the singles as singles and I wasn't a big fan, and my son was like, oh, you got to play it again, you got to listen to it again, it's much better than what you're going to get at first glance. Then I listened to the album and I'm like, wow, these songs sound so much better in the context of the record. It's like I'm listening to a completely different track. And I think that comes a little bit from that, what you're saying, which is the metal listener really gravitates towards the full picture of the record, and not just what a single can do for you. It's
Yeah.
more about a broader spectrum.
Yeah, it is. I would say it is. It's like it's hard to just lift out a chapter of your favorite book and make it perfect on your own.
Mhm.
It's really about you need to read it in its full context.
And speaking of chapters, how important is for you guys how you place these chapters, how you create the track listing? Is that something that you spend a lot of time on once you have all the songs in your hands?
Yeah, it is. Like we had a few different track lists that we bounced off each other for quite some time, and we experimented a lot with it. And I think the one that we chose at the very, which became the final one, was the one where we felt like that it flowed. It had the best flow at the same time as it would give you something new, just when you needed it, like. And yeah, there was definitely a lot of thought put into that, I would say. Absolutely.
I have to talk about the violins. I would be remiss if I didn't mention it, because they do play a very important role. But I honestly didn't feel, and some people might feel it that way, that there's a little bit of a gimmick attached to it. I didn't feel it that way. I felt like they played a very important role in the soundscape of the album and the atmosphere that sound creates. Now, when it came for you guys constructing the songs, what was your idea of where you wanted these violins to come into?
um I guess that it fell into place quite natural. It could be a part where you just felt that you need to make it a little bit more massive, and that time, if it's a chorus or just the bigger C part, where you would use string arrangement more as a layer. You know, we know that we can use that tool in order to create a bigger soundscape. And at some parts, we kind of just felt like this is an opportunity where we can bring out another sounding instrument, like another sounding lead instrument, which is not guitar or Eddie's vocals, because that's all sort of like the B side of Eddie's singing is when he plays lead in violin. And it's an interesting thing because it's something he can do when he's not singing. And I think it adds another layer to our music and our sound, another sort of depth. So it's just nothing that's ever been forced or that we felt like we need to have, because there are a few tracks on the album where the violin is not so outstanding, you know, it's more in the back, which is perfectly fine, because we felt like there are other elements that need to speak louder here. But at some parts we just felt like we need to bring out a sort of emotional character here, and for doing that we should try to turn to this string instrument here.
And you mentioned earlier about using tubes for your guitars instead of going digital. What was the goal with that? What kind of sound did you feel like you were going to be able to get with that the digital approach was not going to give you?
That was not my decision from the beginning. You know, that was when I spoke with Henrik about it, our producer, and he was like, I want to track it with tubes. Like, I want to track with real amps. I was like, really? Wow. Because I write everything, you know, at home when I sit and I demo or whatever, I use my Kemper because it's very convenient. But he said that, no, I really do prefer absolutely to do that. And I feel like you can hear, there's an analog touch to it that I think is very beautiful. And I feel like you can really hear how we like manually like tweak the sounds, you know, all the pedals, how we connected them, like where we place the microphone in front of the cab. You know, it's really something more about capturing the moment, which I feel like you are lacking a little bit when you're doing it digital, even though you can make it sound huge and great. But there was just something about, okay, this is the take here, you know. And this is really, I really felt like with the sound that we were able to accomplish with Henrik, guitar wise, you know, that was such a good match in terms of my style of playing and my style of riffing. Also, I felt like it was just, okay, this is a great match, really great match.
Do you feel like it perhaps gave you a picture before you, instead of using Photoshop to fix that picture?
Yeah, in a way I would say, because, you know, sometimes I know that, or I've been doing this before, you just track something digital with something that sounds pretty good, and then like, yeah, we just reamp that later, like let's reamp it and make it sound good in the post-production. But when you record something with how it sounds, like this is what it's going to sound on the album when people hear it, like this is what you're getting, it's completely different. It's completely different. And I think that's you know what you're talking about here, you know, with the post-production edit is exactly why we are into like analog photography, because we like that capturing the moment feel, like that was it, this is really it, like there's nothing that's been worked on it after. Of course, I mean it was mixed and everything, but the ground, like the core, the core of the part is really there from the beginning.
On this album, when you look at the overall vocals, what do you feel is the biggest strength that the record has in store for the listener?
In vocal wise, I guess that vocal wise, of course, that Eddie has a very, very unique style of singing. You know, he has a very unique voice, and I think Eddie's voice is pretty much that. It's very representative to that perfect like verge where Imminence music is, like where we are talking about absolute power and control and absolute tragedy. Like I think this is exactly like how his voice is sounding when he's singing our parts. I really think that it brings out that element so well. and this is exactly where we want to be here. Like we want to be right there. And I think this album really hit that spot.
Yeah, this album really walks that fine line. You really feel like you're in the middle of these two converging but yet different worlds, which is the strength of the record all around.
Yeah.
Was there a song on this album that created some challenges for you guys in the studio?
Oh wow. Um, Let me think here. Mm, yeah, I would say yes and no. I felt like the recording process was pretty, flawless in a bit. I know that Peter had to work a bit on some of the faster songs because there are like some pretty, technical drumming at some parts. For me personally, um, I recorded one of the tracks with a mandolin, which is very completely like, unknown territory for me. It's one of the most abstract tracks on the album. Is called "This Too Shall Pass," but it's written in Persian, and I recorded with the mandolin, and it was very much different from what I've done before. I tracked some acoustic guitar on that as well, which I'm now pretty used to. But apart from that, I think it went pretty well. I actually did. It was not. I cannot recall that there was like those moments, because I've had those moments before with other songs and other times in the studio that was just really like so much harder than you might have expected when you just wrote it. So I think it went pretty smooth in general.
One last question for you. We touched on this in terms of the quality of the record, and at the same time, the necessity that we have now in the modern day to put out singles. So when you guys were looking at this album and the label was asking you guys for singles and ideas, was there a song that immediately stood out that this had to be the first single? And was that the one that ended up being the first single?
Yeah, it was Temptation. It was always Temptation. It was just from when it was written. It was like, this is the first single. No, this is the first heavy track we're putting out in 2 years, and it's probably the most brutal one we've ever done. And we knew that we wanted to step up the video quality, like the production and the way it sounded after production. Also, I think it was already in the demo stage. It was like, this is the first single. This is just how it is.
Wow, that makes life easier. Starting off
Yeah,
with
yeah. Strangely enough, but I think it was just so, in a way, it had that perfect hard-hitting factor that we just wanted to give people after all that time. Like we came out of a pretty long acoustic era. Like we put out some acoustic songs and even put an acoustic tour on sale. Okay, so how do we follow up on that? Yeah, we just give them Temptation. Bang, like that.
yeah, you reset everybody's minds and expectations with an absolute banger.
Yeah, yeah, maybe so.
Well, Harold, thank you very much for your time, man. I really appreciate talking to you about the album, about the band. All the best for you guys, and take care.
And you too. Thank you so much for having me.
Take care. Bye.
Yeah, bye-bye.